They say some houses are built with purpose. Others are built with fear. The Winchester Mystery House isn't just a mansion. It's a labyrinth carved by grief, guilt, and perhaps guidance from the other side. Some believe it was built to appease the dead. Others think it was a descent into madness. But when grief becomes a blueprint, what rises from the ground can haunt more than just its walls. So make sure you're comfortable, because the deeper you go into the Winchester house, the harder it is to find your way out. Hey there, Night Owls, and welcome back to Midnight Mysteries. As always, I'm your host, Shaylin Jade, and tonight we're heading to San Jose, California to step inside one of the most bizarre and iconic haunted homes in American history. Make sure you stick around because after we've explored these winding halls, we have our weekly Night Owl narrative segment where we get to hear a chilling, yet sweet, real-life experience submitted to me by Nikita. You don't want to miss it. If you have your own unexplained experiences, you can send it to midnightmysteriespodcast@outlook.com to be featured in your own Night Owl narrative segment. So the Winchester Mystery House has fascinated paranormal investigators and skeptics alike for a very long time. It's a sprawling, maze-like Victorian mansion filled with architectural oddities and whispers of spirits guiding every hammer and nail. To understand how a house like this ever came to be, we need to look at the woman behind it. Sarah Lockwood Winchester wasn't always cloaked in mystery. She was born in 1839 to a respectable family in New Haven, Connecticut. Highly educated, well-spoken, fluent in multiple languages, and known for her grace and intelligence. She moved easily through the circles of high society. But her life would take a fateful turn when she married William Wirt Winchester, the only son of Oliver Winchester, the man behind one of the most infamous weapons in America, the Winchester rifle. Now, the Winchester name wasn't just wealthy, it was legendary. Oliver's company had manufactured the gun that won the West, a lever-actioned repeating rifle used in wars by settlers and lawmen alike. It was sleek, deadly, and efficient, and with every battle, every bullet, and every death, the Winchester fortune grew. When Oliver Winchester died, William inherited the business, and when William died in 1881 from tuberculosis, all of that wealth passed directly to Sarah. Modern estimates put it at around $500 million in today's money. She was also given nearly 50% ownership of the company, meaning she earned a staggering income of about $1,000 per day, which would roughly translate to $30,000 a day in modern times. But this wasn't a rags to riches story. This was a tale soaked in grief, because just a few years earlier, Sarah and William had already endured the most devastating loss of all, their infant daughter, Annie Pardee Winchester. Annie had died from marasmus, a rare condition caused by severe malnutrition. She was only 6 weeks old. That tragedy alone was enough to shatter anyone. But then, to lose her husband not long after, it was too much. Sarah was alone. And not just alone. She was haunted. After the death of her husband in 1881, Sarah Winchester was devastated. Grief consumed her. She withdrew from the East Coast social scenes and began seeking answers, not from doctors, but from the spiritual world. It was during the time of this deep mourning that Sarah allegedly visited a medium or a spiritualist, someone who claimed they could speak to the dead. Spiritualism was booming in the late 19th century, especially among the wealthy, and seances were as common in upper-class parlours as tea and brandy. The story goes that Sarah asked this medium why she had suffered such profound loss. First her baby, then her beloved husband. And the answers she received would change her life forever. The medium told Sarah she was cursed, not by chance, not by fate, but by the blood spilled from every single Winchester rifle ever sold. The spirits of those who had died by the infamous weapon were angry, and they were seeking vengeance. The message was chilling. Her family's fortune was stained, and now these restless souls were coming for her. But there was one way she might keep them at bay. She was told to sell her home in New Haven, move west, and build a new house. Not just any house, but a sanctuary for the dead. A place where the spirits could dwell peacefully. And the most important part? She must never stop building. As long as the construction continued, the spirits would be appeased. Sarah, shattered by grief and desperate for purpose, listened. Soon after, she sold everything and left Connecticut behind. She boarded a train to California and in 1884 purchased an unfinished farmhouse in Santa Clara Valley, a quiet patch of land that would soon become one of the strangest homes in American history. And from the moment she moved in, the construction never stopped. Day and night, week after week, year after year, crews worked around the clock, adding rooms, tearing them down, starting again. No architect, no blueprints, just Sarah and the spirits she believed she needed to please. But what exactly did she build? Well, that's where things get really bizarre. By the turn of the 20th century, what began as an 8-room farmhouse had transformed into a vast, eccentric estate with 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 staircases, 17 chimneys, and 13 bathrooms. But raw numbers can't capture what makes this place so chilling, because many of these rooms serve no practical purpose. Let's start with the staircases. Several of them led nowhere. One rises sharply into the ceiling and ends abruptly. Another is known as the switchback staircase. It features 7 flights with 44 steps, but rises only about 9 feet. The steps are deliberately shallow, only a few inches tall. It's believed Sarah had this staircase built to accommodate her worsening arthritis. But the strange configuration gives it an almost dreamlike quality, a place that loops endlessly without destination. Then there are doors that open into brick walls, and more unnervingly, doors that open to 2-story drops straight to the ground below. One infamous example, dubbed the door to nowhere, opens from an upper floor to open air with no balcony, no railing, just a deadly fall. Windows appear in places they shouldn't, in the floor, in the middle of the walls, or facing into other rooms instead of outdoors. Skylights are installed beneath additional ceilings, completely defeating their purpose. In some hallways, mirrors are positioned to reflect other mirrors, bouncing light endlessly into nothing. So what was the point of all of this? There are several prevailing theories. Some believe these bizarre features were deliberate spiritual decoys, Sarah's attempt to confuse or trap the spirits she believed were haunting her. She may have thought that if she could mislead them with endless corridors, false doors, and broken paths, she could protect herself from their vengeance. Others suggest Sarah was building under spiritual guidance, possibly channeling instructions during seances. She reportedly held nightly sessions in the seance room, a small space tucked deep within the mansion, accessible only through a series of narrow passages. It's said that she used this room to communicate with the spirits and receive building instructions from the beyond. In fact, some workers claimed they were given plans sketched on scraps of paper with no explanation. One of the eeriest aspects of the design is her obsession with the number 13. It's everywhere. 13 panes of glass, 13 steps on staircases, 13 hooks in cupboards, and 13 ceiling tiles in certain rooms. Even her will was divided into 13 parts and signed 13 times. Whether it was a form of spiritual protection or a superstition taken to extremes, it added yet another layer of unease to an already uncanny place. And this constant construction, it never ceased. Not even during the 1906 earthquake, which severely damaged the mansion. Instead of repairing the most damaged portions, Sarah simply boarded them up. The front portion of the house, which had once stood 7 stories high, was never rebuilt. She focused instead on building ever outward, away from the damaged core, as if she feared disturbing the spirits that may have been angered during the quake. For nearly 38 years, the hammers never stopped. Crews worked in rotating shifts, materials were ordered constantly, even as some projects were torn down and rebuilt again. Money was no object. She could afford to build endlessly, and she did. But the question remains, was this house really for the living or for the dead? To those on the outside, Sarah Winchester was a recluse, a woman shrouded in grief and secrecy. And as the house grew more bizarre, so did the rumors surrounding her. She was rarely seen in public, and when she was, she often wore a black mourning veil, reinforcing the image of a widow consumed by sorrow. Despite her wealth, she dressed modestly, preferred privacy, and gave few, if any, interviews. Her only regular social contact was with her staff and her beloved pets, and the rotating team of workers building her mansion. Locals whispered about the strange house, with its sounds of hammers echoing at all hours and wagons arriving constantly with supplies. It became a source of fascination and suspicion. Some believed she was insane. Others were convinced she was a medium, building under the direct command of ghosts. But those who knew Sarah more intimately painted a different picture. She was highly intelligent, musically gifted, and an avid reader of philosophy, architecture, and spirituality. She was especially drawn to the works of mystics and esoteric scholars. Her interest in the afterlife may have been rooted less in fear and more in inquiry, a desire to understand, to make peace, or perhaps even to find redemption. She was also charitable, though she avoided public recognition for it. She quietly donated to local hospitals, schools, and organizations supporting the arts. In many ways, she was a woman ahead of her time, a self-made estate manager, an independent thinker, and a widow navigating life on her own terms in a world that didn't quite know what to make of her. Despite the myths, there is no official record of Sarah ever claiming to be haunted or driven by spirits. She never confirmed or denied the spiritual motivations for the house. What we know is built on second-hand accounts, tales from workers, townspeople, and curious visitors who spun stories to make sense of the unexplainable. And then in 1922, after nearly 4 decades of non-stop construction, the house fell silent. Sarah Winchester passed away in her sleep at the age of 82 while staying in her bedroom, a modest room compared to the mansion's grander spaces. Upon her death, the tools were laid down for the first and last time. Nails were left mid-swing, construction halted completely. The woman who had spent her life building obsessively, and perhaps purposefully, was gone. When Sarah Winchester died, she left behind a house that was anything but peaceful. Sprawling and incomplete, the Winchester mansion was a puzzle in every sense of the word. Her niece, Marion, cleared the house of valuables, including furniture and personal items. But as for the mansion itself, it posed a unique problem. With staircases that led to ceilings, doors that opened into thin air, and a floor plan that defied logic, the home was unsellable by conventional means. But to John H. Brown, a local investor and amusement park owner, it was gold. Sensing the public's appetite for mystery, Brown leased the home and within months opened it as a tourist attraction, the Winchester Mystery House. From day one, the strange architecture was enough to draw crowds, but it didn't take long before people started noticing more than just the confusing blueprints. Early caretakers were the first to experience what they believed was supernatural activity. One caretaker reported hearing hammering at night, long after construction had stopped, the sound echoing faintly through the halls as if ghostly carpenters still carried on Sarah's endless renovations. He'd also often find tools moved or missing entirely, only to reappear later in odd places. Tour guides and staff have their own tales as well. One long-time employee described hearing footsteps pacing on the upper floors when no one else was inside. Another recalled cold spots that would drift through certain rooms. And a few claimed to have seen the shadowy figure of a man they called the wheelbarrow ghost, a spectral handyman in white overalls and a brimmed hat, seen pushing a wheelbarrow down the long, narrow corridors of the basement. One of the most consistently reported hotspots for paranormal activity is Room 17, also known as the Mirror Room. Oddly, Sarah Winchester is said to have avoided mirrors. There were only a handful in the entire mansion despite its hundreds of rooms. Tour guides theorized she may have feared that mirrors could trap spirits. Visitors in Room 17 often report a tingling sensation as if being watched. Some claim to have seen fleeting reflections of people who aren't there. One woman fainted in the room during a tour, and when she came to, she whispered, "She didn't want me in here." Of course, no part of the mansion is more legendary than Sarah's seance room, a tiny, windowless chamber hidden deep within the home, accessible only by secret passageways. It's said that Sarah used this room to communicate with the spirits, perhaps to ask them for instructions or to ease the dead who lingered restlessly. Paranormal investigators have reported intense EMF readings in this room, even when all electronics were removed. Some psychics claim to have made contact with a woman they believe is Sarah, always fleeting, never clear, but deeply emotional. One visitor claimed that the moment they entered the seance room, their watch stopped completely and only began ticking again once they left the house. Over the years, multiple guests and employees have claimed to have seen Sarah herself. She's often spotted in the Hall of Fires or standing silently in corners before disappearing. Most describe her as wearing a black Victorian dress and veil, sometimes holding a key or a lantern. One staff member saw her reflection beside his own in a window, even though no one was standing next to him. Today, the Winchester Mystery House continues to operate as both a historic landmark and a hotbed of paranormal intrigue. It's been featured on Ghost Adventures, BuzzFeed Unsolved, and numerous other ghost hunting programs. Skeptics may scoff at the tales, pointing to faulty wiring, overactive imaginations, or the psychological power of suggestion. But even those who arrive as non-believers often leave feeling a bit off, as if something stayed with them. So whether it's haunted by spirits or by the weight of one woman's grief, guilt, and genius, The Winchester Mystery House stands as one of the most intriguing places in America, a place where the past doesn't rest and maybe never will. So, what do you believe? Was Sarah Winchester simply a grieving widow pouring her sorrow into the only thing she could control, a house that kept growing as long as she kept breathing? Or was she following instructions from the other side, one blueprint at a time, trying to keep the spirits of the dead at bay? Some say the house is a symbol of madness, others a work of genius. Maybe it's both. A place where grief and guilt became architecture, where doors lead to nowhere because the person building them no longer knew where she was going. And yet the questions linger. Why the seance room? Why the obsession with the number 13? Why build a staircase with 7 turns and 2 inches per step? Was it all superstition? Or was it survival? Whatever the truth is, one thing is undeniable. The Winchester Mystery House is no ordinary home. It's a story trapped in wood and glass. And if you ever get the chance to walk its halls, take a moment to listen. Not to the tour guide, but to the silence. Listen to the house. It is now time for my weekly Night Owl narrative submitted by Nikita, who wanted to share an experience involving her young son. Nikita says, "My son has always been close with his cousins as they used to come over regularly, at least 3 to 4 times a week for a visit. My sister's eldest son is named Joshua, and Joshua was always the first to run inside to greet us. Sometimes we wouldn't even hear my sister's car. Joshua would just appear. One day, I was going about my business in the lounge room when my son, then about 4 to 5 years old, excitedly shouted from the kitchen, 'Joshua's here!' In the moment, I paid no mind. I figured the kids and my sister would come in to greet us momentarily. Some time went by and I wasn't hearing any noises from kids, no foot traffic, nor my sister's voice. So I went into the kitchen to where my son was. He was still there, looking in the cupboard for a snack when I asked him, 'You said Joshua was here?' To which he replied, 'Yeah, he is.' I looked out the window and back door to see if maybe the kids were outside, but there was no one. I asked again, 'So where's Joshua and Auntie?' My son frowned and said, 'No, not that Joshua. Uncle Joshua,' pointing to the empty doorway between the lounge room and the kitchen. Confused, I then asked, 'What do you mean, Uncle Joshua? Joshy's your cousin, not your uncle.' My son replies, 'No, silly, Uncle Joshua, just like Uncle Mark. Mark is one of my brothers.' So I asked if he could show me exactly where Uncle Joshua was. He replied, 'He's gone now, but he looks just like me.' He boasted and casually skipped off with his biscuits. I was born a twin, 1 girl, 1 boy. A month after we were born, he passed away due to complications. His name was Joshua Michael. So my son would have had an Uncle Joshua. Another weird element is I spoke to a psychic once who mentioned a baby boy born Earthside, however, didn't survive. At first, the psychic thought I had lost a child as the energy was familial. But then he quickly corrected himself without my prompt and said, 'This is your brother. Were you born a twin?' To my shock, I nodded my head, to which he replied, 'If you've ever wondered what he might look like, he's a spitting image of your son.' Nikita, thank you so much for sharing that with us. The way your son so confidently recognized his Uncle Joshua and even said he looked just like him, to then be confirmed from an outside source, how do you give that a logical explanation? Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could follow, subscribe, or leave a rating or review. It helps the show grow and helps other like-minded individuals find these mysterious conversations. You can also follow me on Instagram at midnightmysteries.podcast and keep the conversation going. Next time on Midnight Mysteries, we explore the chilling world of haunted dolls and why you might think twice before locking eyes with one in the dark. Until then, good night, night owls, and sweet dreams.